It's great to meet you. Thank you for taking a minute out today. I appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
So your line of work is fascinating. I'm looking forward to getting into it, but I'm curious, how did the pandemic influence the way that you're doing work now? Was there a shift in things based on living through the pandemic?
There was actually, so this company that I'm Conceivable, my company started in actually 2016, and we really struggled. We built the technology in 2016, and we were just early.
Yeah.
People didn't believe that an app could fix your fertility. We were charging for the app, and people weren't charging for those apps at the same time. And I had just basically put it aside because we were really struggling to commercialize it, which didn't make any sense to me at all. And then during the pandemic, Gary Vaynerchuk, Gary V, is one of my investors,
Yeah.
and he's an LP in the fund that invested in my company. And so my investor was like, "Hey, go spend the day with Gary and see what he says." And so we had spun off a second company called Brazen that was about periods, helping people with PMS and cramping.
Yeah.
And so I went to talk to Gary, and we spent the day together. And he was like, you know, excuse my language. He's like, "You need to fucking be on TikTok all day long."
Yeah.
And this was, the beginning of the pandemic. And I said, I'm in my 50s. And I thought that TikTok was just like little girls doing dances. I was like, what am I going to dance about? Periods? I don't even know what you're talking about. He's like, don't be such a bitch. Pull up your panties, pick out your camera, look into the camera and talk to them like you are talking to your daughter. Teach them.
Yeah.
And so I started doing that. And within a few months, I had a couple 100,000 followers.
Wow.
And I realized the mistake that I made in the first version of Conceivable, because we were building a unicorn,
Yeah.
right? Just had so much potential. Our success rates were so good. But what our advice was from my investors and other, just advisors were like, we need to scrub you out of it because if you're gonna like Uber can't have a face, right? If
Right.
you can't exit from that company very easily if the founder is the person who's like the guts of the thing. So we had scrubbed that out. And in any video content that we made, I was in a lab coat, I was wearing a stethoscope, and I was like, well, today we're going to talk about the impacts, therapeutic, blah, blah. Then on TikTok, I just let Gary's like, be your 100% real self,
Yeah.
cuss, be scrappy, all the things that they had told me to do in the first version. Like, that's a little too informal. Could you make it a little more professional? Well, that is what I think ruined our company the first round through, because then I started another TikTok just about fertility, just talking straight, very straight about fertility, about women's health, all these things, and built a huge following there. And it got so big that I was like, I'm going to rebuild Conceivable because
Yeah.
I think I know what I did wrong. So it was really the genesis of the pandemic that one conversation with Gary Vaynerchuk that ultimately got me to sort of go take another swing at this, but this time I bootstrapped it.
Yeah.
So I didn't really have any money. And so I was building tiny little pieces at a time and testing it. And I would test it with my TikTok audience.
Yeah.
And ultimately, we got like our app, the final version of the app is going to be ready in the next few days. So pretty happy. 10-year project.
Wow. So let me ask you this. If you were to explain this app and to explain what you do to a bunch of grade school kids at Career Day, how would you go about doing that?
So I help people who can't have babies. That's what I do. I use technology to do that so that people always like, how can an app get you pregnant? Like, does it check your blood? Well, I was an acupuncturist for 25 years.
Yeah.
I was the first reproductive acupuncturist in North America. And in Chinese medicine, it started 3,000 years ago.
Yeah.
3,000 years ago, we didn't have blood tests. We didn't have anything diagnostic, no x-rays, MRIs, CAT scans, ultrasound, HSG, semen analysis, any of these things. They had to get really, really good at paying attention to the clinical presentation, the symptoms
Yeah.
that the person has. So this app is modeled after if you and your wife were having, if you're married to a woman, if you were having trouble getting pregnant, this app is the equivalent of me coming over to your house and living with you and talking to you a lot, all day, every day, as much as I can. So the first experience, instead of going in any fitness trapper, what you usually do is, you fill out an onboarding.
Yeah.
I'm 29. I have 4 days of bleeding. My period's 32 days. It's so boring, right? We don't do that. We built like a digital twin of myself. That means a full AI video, audio, everything of myself. She comes in. We're not using audio just yet because it's $1 a minute. It's
Wow.
extremely expensive. And for a 45-minute consultation, starts making it, the app will cost too much, right? If we do that. But currently with voice, so she comes in and in my voice, she says, "Hi, doll, how's it going? Tell me what's going on with your fertility." And then she tells her story. It's a really important part of the app because people with infertility are gaslit very badly. They're like, just keep trying, everything will be fine, you know? And it's so shameful, they hardly ever tell their story.
Yeah.
So in my consultations, I would let them talk for 20 minutes out of the hour if they wanted to, because I felt actually it was really therapeutic. So
Sure.
the app does this. So as a person's talking, they're like, I had 6 failed IVFs. She's like, oh my gosh. And then I had 2 losses. Oh, how did you handle that? It's very native experience.
Yeah.
And through this conversation, she figures out that clinical presentation. What are all the underlying issues?
Yeah.
Not the disease states like endometriosis or PCOS, but like, oh, there's only 1 day of bleeding. It's not possible to get pregnant with 1 day of bleeding. There's no lining for implantation.
Yeah.
And so it identifies those problems. Then she sends you over to analyze your tongue because the tongue tells us a lot about digestion.
Yeah.
So she says, I'd like to see your tongue. So go over to a well-lit window, stick out your tongue, take a picture of it and upload it, and then I'll analyze it for you.
Yeah.
She then says, okay, now I have all the information. I know what's wrong. She teaches them what's wrong. And she says, now let's start with your interventions, how we're going to fix these things. First is food. I have a chef for you. Her name is Casey. And what you're going to do is just go in there and talk to Casey. Casey pops in. She's like, hi, I'm your chef. I've already looked at everything else. I know what to plan for you. Is there anything else I need to know? Like, do you have a cold? Do you have COVID? Do you have any food sensitivities? Do you have other foods that you don't like? Anything else I should know about? And then that week, and what week are you of your period? Because each week we need different things happening.
Yeah.
And she makes the menu plans exactly, macros, everything for what she needs. And then it sends her to a page that says, I ate this, and it has a picture of what she was recommended to eat, or another one that says, I ate this, and it has a picture of a camera. So she just takes a picture of that and then it uploads that, looks at the macros, and she even can do therapy with her.
Wow.
So if she, we have a ring, I'm not wearing my ring right now, but we have a wearable ring called a halo, which allows us to do a lot of different things. But one of them is it's a stress measure, not just how stressed you feel in the moment, but how much is actually stress pushing you out of rest and relax or restore, which is where our bodies can heal, and into flight or fright.
Yeah.
Flight or fright means adrenaline is pumping all day long,
Yeah.
destroying your eggs.
Wow.
Because adrenaline is like gasoline. It's designed to help you pick up a car if it's on top of your child.
Yeah.
But when you get that much gasoline all day, every day for months and years, it really degrades the eggs, the ovaries, all your cells, everything. So anytime she sees that those numbers are low, she sends the person a text and says, oh my gosh, seems like you're having a rough time. Come talk to me.
Yeah.
And then she does talk therapy with cognitive behavioral therapy and compassion therapy and a whole bunch of other stuff. But I don't want to talk the whole time about the app. But
Yeah. No.
it's not, it's a complex thing. And to really get the sense of like the power behind it, you kind of have to hear all of it.
That is fascinating. So, was your dream always to get into medicine? Take me back to the beginnings of your life. What did you want to be when you grew up?
I wanted to be a news broadcaster. That's the earliest thing I wanted to be, which
Yeah.
really, because of what I do on TikTok, I kind of am a news broadcaster
Uh-huh.
because I tell stories about health, women's health, and fertility. Um, and then I was a linguistics professor. I really love languages, and I got really sick and ended up going to an acupuncturist. And after the acupuncturist really helped me in a very short period of time, I started getting really interested in traditional Chinese medicine. I went to acupuncture college. And in acupuncture college, because again, we don't have the benefit of any labs, anything, every single symptom from like, I get a twitch right there at 3 o'clock in the afternoon,
Yeah.
that means something to an acupuncturist,
Yeah.
right? Sometimes I have diarrhea, sometimes I have constipation, that means something to us.
Yeah.
And so it's the way that we can use user collected data to make a picture of what's wrong because we're looking at so many dozens and dozens of factors. And so, especially around women's health, I'm coming back to your question of how did I
Yeah.
get here? When I started learning all the things that every single part of a woman's period can tell us diagnostically, I had the light bulb. I was like, swing. I was like, boy, there's something here that nobody knows about. We can completely transform women's health with this information. We just have to learn how to harness it.
Yeah.
Just like if you tell women, like women will say, I don't know, I had 6 failed IVFs. I don't know what's wrong. Like how many days of bleeding you have? One, like it'll never work.
Yeah.
It'll never work because you can make a fertilized embryo, but it's got to have some place to land.
Yeah. Yeah.
And more importantly, why isn't there much blood? Because
Yeah.
that's another, is it because what she's eating? That means there isn't resources to make enough blood. Because
Yeah.
some people say, well, we'll just give her iron. It still doesn't fix the underlying issue.
Yeah.
So from there, I became obsessed with the menstrual cycle. I'm probably the only person that's ever said that in the
Yeah.
history of history.
Yeah.
And I wrote a book called Seeing Red on menstruation, and then decided just to focus on fertility. And then that was a 20-year clinical career and switched in the last 6.
So who's been that motivator for you, that inspiration that's fueled you to do this work and to be kind of a trailblazer in what you do?
That'll, that'll choke me up because it's very powerful for me.
Sure.
I spent since the first day of the pandemic, I spent every day for at least 1 to 2 hours talking, just answering questions, being with women who are struggling, whether just to have a period, to ovulate, they have endometriosis, whatever. And even though I had a 20-year clinical experience with more than 10,000 women, it was a little bit different. This is so intimate. And again, I decided to do this a long time ago, but hearing one, how women are treated in the Western medical system just over and over, and how they're just left to suffer, that 80% of women have life-interrupting menstrual pain and PMS, and nobody seems to think that's a problem. In Chinese medicine, they're very significant, like red flags for fertility, plus just the quality of life. And I just got this in my mind. I was like, when I read that stat, when I was researching my book, I was like, wow, 80% of women are really compromised at least a week a month. I'm really curious what would happen to society if we relieved them of that burden. If they were operating on not only with their periods, but if their energy was high, they knew how to cope with stress, they knew what to eat for their particular body, not like a fad diet, they were weight appropriate. What can happen in society? And what if we teach women who are struggling to get pregnant that they become different kinds of mothers? And so now the mother who couldn't get pregnant and was eating more junk food and McDonald's and, doing all the things that all of us do, she now has a daughter or a son, and she's like, okay, I'm doing it differently with them.
Yeah.
And all the things that she learns over the few months that she's with us, or many months maybe, she can then translate. And so then we have the opportunity to make a generational impact. And that is what's really inspiring to me.
So when you're explaining this app and the ultimate goal is to conceive, do you ever find yourself thinking, because when you're doing the project, you got A and Z. Do you ever think about how many kids are going to come into this world that you're never going to meet that were a part of this process that you aided in?
Well, when I was still in practice in Austin, that was where my biggest practice was. My kids were like 2 and 4, and every time we would go out, because I had 10,000 patients in Austin,
Yeah.
and every time some woman would walk up and she'd be like, and my kids would be like, oh no, here we go. Oh no, here we go. And they'd be like, oh my gosh, this is my child. You made this baby.
Yeah.
And to me, it was really beautiful. And one time I was at the swimming pool and I was like, in a swimsuit, I was wet. I was with my son, who's very precocious 5-year-old. And the same thing happened. This lady looked at me. She's like, I know you from somewhere. And I knew who she was. And I was like, yeah, me too. Just always try to protect people's privacy in public and let them finally realize, what to disclose. And so she's like, no, no, I definitely know you. I was like, yeah, I don't know, me too. And then my son goes, excuse me. He's very straight. He goes, excuse me, lady. And I was like, shh. And he goes, is that your baby? And she said, yeah. And he goes, I know how you know my mom. He's like, she's the baby maker. She makes all the babies in Austin. And she's like, that's right. I went to you for acupuncture. So yeah, I expect that. But there's a saying in Chinese medicine that the good doctor treats the patient. The
Yeah.
great doctor treats society,
Yeah.
but the master will make herself obsolete. And that's what I'm trying to do.
Wow. What's the best advice you've ever gotten in the realm of whether it's healthcare or otherwise? What's the best advice?
I have gotten such good advice. The best advice for conceivable, I'll tell you two. One from my father, even though you only asked for one,
Right.
was for conceivable was one of my investors early on. He goes, I think you're playing too small. And I was like, what? I'm playing huge. He goes, I think you're not failing enough.
Yeah.
He goes, you have a huge, very innovative brain. And if everything's working, you're not playing big enough. And
Yeah.
he's like, 50% of what you should try should fail. And
All of these things that you've accomplished and evolved into, what are you the proudest of?
I'm proudest of this app,
Yeah.
the technology behind the app. I mean, of course, I'm the mom of two amazing kids that I raised by myself. So first, that's them because I think having children is the hardest job.
Yeah.
It is the hardest job ever. But I'm just proud of Conceivable because uh, when we first built the first version of it, I was full of ego and just like, this is so badass, and we're gonna have a unicorn and everybody's gonna love it. And we had like 50 press mentions on the first day. I mean, it was just set up to just, be an avalanche.
Yeah.
And we didn't get any sales.
Yeah.
And and but I had a patent because people were like, you should just fire sale it. And I was like, I can't give up the patent. I'm gonna build this. I'm gonna build this. And what it ended up being was exactly what I had envisioned. But 7 or 8 years ago, the technology, it just would have cost at least $1 million to build what we built
Yeah.
today. Because OpenAI and GPT wasn't there, and the technology for AI and the voice technology and the sentiment analysis and all those things didn't exist. But when I look at it, I'm like, I can't believe it became real.
Yeah.
And it's breaking every day. And our customers are like, it's breaking. And I was like, we built something that's never been built before.
Yeah. Yeah.
So just hang in there. We'll take
That's
good
it.
care of you.
That's it. So at the end of the day, everyone out there has a perception of you, family, friends, colleagues,
Oh,
everyone
interesting.
that gets your everyone, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Uh, I'm a river going down a mountain. You can't stop me.
Yeah.
You cannot stop me. And that was my other piece of advice. That's what my father told me every day. I was a competitive athlete, and he'd be like, I'd be hurt or whatever. And he'd be like, you're a river going down a mountain. Imagine it. Be the river. Nothing can stop you.
Yeah.
Nothing can stop you. You'll just go over or around or under. And that's been a real guiding principle for me. And, I'll say, like, you can punch me in the face 5 times in a row, and I'm going to get up every time. I'll get up every time, no matter what,
Yeah.
especially if it's something that I feel is really important.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. Let's get to the very important part here. If anyone wants the app, anybody wants to learn more, they want to reach out to you, any of the good business, where do they go?
So easy, conceivable.com.
Okay.
And if this airs before Black Friday, well,
Yeah.
before Monday, after Black Friday, Cyber Monday, whatever, we have a great deal. You can get a Halo ring, 6 months free of the app, and a free month of our clinical grade prenatal for $200. So that's a really good deal. That's like
Okay.
$400.
And this will be out before that, so I'm looking forward to getting it out. What a fascinating story. Good luck with this launch. I mean, I keep thinking about, did you ever watch the show Monk?
No, but it's been I keep seeing it because I know people really loved it, and I'm kind of a TV addict.
Okay, so it's interesting because he's this investigator that comes in. I don't want to give anything away because they rebooted and made a movie, but it's kind of that part in the movie where people are like, what the hell am I doing? Like, what is
Mhm.
my meaning? Who am I affecting? And it's so interesting because you get to see that, but you're actually bringing all of these lives in, which
Mhm.
is creating all these ripples with all of these humans that want to bring life into the world. It's such a
Mhm.
fascinating story. So I love this. Thank you so much for opening up. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's been a real pleasure. Thanks for letting me share my story. I'm, super passionate about it. And please, if anyone is thinking about getting pregnant, having a hard time staying pregnant, even have a terrible diagnosis, just reach out and I'll let my thoughts and if there's something I can do to help. And if not, who can?
Absolutely. I'll shout it from the mountaintops. This has been wonderful. Thank you so much. Best of luck.
Have a great day and happy Thanksgiving too.
Yeah, same to you. Take care.